Okay, we are here for a work session on the 2021 annual budget county manager recommendations. I will hand this over to Kathleen and Emily for the presentation.
Thank you. And just so the council knows, we do have a lot of representatives from the departments here. They're here to share their expertise if there's something that they want to add. And for those of you who are on, please just a kind reminder to mute yourselves to reduce background noise. So we are here today to talk about the 2020 annual budget recommendations. We'll be going over quickly the annual budget process, challenges with the general fund overview, departments and offices, the recommendations being made today, and 2021 property tax levy options for the council to consider. With regards to the 2021 development process, next slide, please. Departments actually started working on budget submissions during the summer. We met, both Emily and I met with all the departments and elected officials to discuss their budget requests in September. And today we are here to present, or I'm here to present the recommendations to the council for your consideration. The full decision packages that were submitted are online. They were posted on October 3rd. The only decision packages that are tied to this sessions are the decisions that I'm recommending. With regards to the process next steps, after today, on Monday, November 16th, the elected officials will have an opportunity to provide feedback to the council regarding the budget, and on November 17th will be the budget hearing. And during the budget hearing, the council can certainly make any amendments to the recommendations today. Next slide. So looking at the budget focus and guiding principles for 2021, I really wanted to take approach, I'm sorry if the sun's blocking me here a little bit, looking for additional efficiencies and cost savings to steer the county's financial outlook to a more fiscally resilient and sustainable future. We also wanted to look at addressing ongoing critical baseline shortfalls. Last year, the council did approve some money for facilities. We are still working on a capital facilities plan to look at that for a longer term and making sure that our facilities are taken care of efficiently. The other shortfalls that we can see is the subsidy that community development is getting with the land use review. So these are certainly opportunities that we can look at through this budget process and beyond. I do want to maintain financial flexibility to ensure that we can respond to the ever-changing circumstances as we have seen in the year 2020. And then follow a current plan for fund balance stability as well, so that we are in compliance with the fund balance policy. The council is probably familiar with this slide from our previous conversations with the supplemental, but there are certain types of requests that departments can ask for. The first one is previously approved by the council. These are ones that the council has approved during a council time or council meeting. Budget neutral, so just some revenue coming in and revenue going out, so there's no impact. Budget interventions, these are looking at efficiencies or reductions. Carry forward, these were approved in the prior budget, but have not been completed, so it's carrying forward those funds to next year. Technical adjustments, we have some of those just fixing coding or fixing any transitions for Questica or moving into Questica, and then new requests. We did have a total of 209 packages. And I will mention on the budget interventions, I did ask all departments to submit budget interventions up to 8% reduction scenarios. Most of the departments did submit them, not all. These were to deal with any unanticipated ongoing concerns financially due to COVID and not knowing how we're going to be, as well as the longer term budget deficit that we're looking at. And I'll share a slide on that shortly. I have to apologize, I have a cold, so I've got to. Okay, 2021 budget new funding requests. As I mentioned earlier, we've had 209 new requests. If all of these requests were to be approved, you can see what the impact to county funds are. Expenditure increases would increase by more than $112 million. The revenue increase would be over $58 million, and then the decrease in the total fund balance, this is all funds, would be $53.7 million. Going into the challenges and general fund overview. Our current challenges that we continue to face, and we'll see in an additional slide here, is our salaries and benefits. These have ongoing cost increases for ongoing salaries and benefits, and it's outpacing the revenue growth. Many areas are pressured by the increase in demand for services, new mandates that are unfunded, and rising costs. The county faces aging technology, infrastructure replacement, and some major maintenance. Cost of providing services increases as inflation and population grows. And additionally, our real estate excise tax $1 are depleting, putting extra pressure onto the general fund. This next slide is a slide that was produced by the auditor's office. This is just showing sales tax leakage by showing the estimated 2019 county retail sales per capita. On the far left, that is the county average for the state of Washington. We are in the red column there. The state average includes King County, but it does not, King County is not included in this graph here other than in the bright green color. Clark County ranks 18 out of 39 counties and 9th of the 10 largest county. The sales tax leakage that we face due to being on the border of Oregon is about 10 to 30% any given year. If Clark County received the state average capita, we would receive an additional $12.7 million. And I do think that Clark County is truly unique in this, in that I met with the finance team yesterday, and one of them made a comment to me about, Benton County being on the border, as well as Spokane being on the border of Idaho. They don't have Portland across the river, a large metropolitan area that we do, where people can go across the river and not pay sales tax. For the general fund, this is also a familiar graph, I think. For general fund revenue, the baseline revenue is over $172 million. Property tax is about 42%. Historically, property tax increases 1 to 3% per year. The 2021 forecast for property tax, we are remaining flat for 2021 due to the unforeseen impact still dealing with COVID. Sales tax is about 26% or $45 million. Historically, we grow about 4.2%. Again, 2021 projections that we're using, we're going to remain flat at this time. And then other revenues, $55.9 million or 32%. That revenue, we have historically been flat and sometimes a little bit of a decline. We are forecasting that to be flat for 2021. Total expenses in the bottom right corner is about $174 million. The majority of this is salaries and benefits. It's about 71% of our expenses. Supplies and services make up the rest of the 29% at just over $50 million. As I mentioned, our increases for 2021 were remaining flat, and then starting in 2022, we'll start doing escalation clauses. And we are continually reviewing these numbers, so they actually might be updated sooner during next year in the supplemental, but that is our projection at this time. This slide was updated a little bit from the last presentation that we did for the revenues. So 2020 revenue assumptions have been updated based on the actual information and data that we're collecting now. We are now projecting a $6 million loss rather than an $8.1 million that we were projecting earlier. The expense assumptions, this was also updated based on real data. Again, the finance team, all the auditor's office, the budget and treasurer's office continually are monitoring these funds and seeing what we're getting from the Department of Revenue based on our budget. So expenses have been updated to save approximately $8 million in savings from departments rather than $7 million. And I tell you, everybody in this county, every department stepped up in 2020 to get us through 2020 within budget with having the revenue shortfall that nobody anticipated. And this is a true testament to that work that departments have done. This is the 6-year forecast for general fund. This does not include any recommendations that are being presented today. I'll share that in a few slides. What this shows is the updated numbers that with the expense and revenue. The total revenue decline from 2020 to 2021 is due to some one-time funding, such as grants. Total expenditure decline due to one-time funding as well. And some of that is, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but we had a legal judgment that we were responsible for, $1.5 million that's being paid out this year or done. It's been over the last 5 or 6 years. Again, this does not assume the 1% property tax. That will be on a future slide. And as you can see, our expenses are continually outweighing our revenues, which is what's contributing to a structural deficit. And with this, you can see the minimum fund balance per policy and how this is affected. The projected ending fund balance right now is $10.5 million for this year. I want to make it very clear that this is due to the one-time savings and one-time revenue coming in from CARES funding. This is not an ongoing cost. So it does look large, but we need to be very strategic on how we are spending that money and to make sure that we're financially stable through the years to come. Because as you can see, in 2026, we're showing a $40 million shortfall, even with that $10 million available fund balance at this time. So going into the recommendations. Again, I'm looking at a fiscally conservative recommendations, ensuring that we have adequate reserves, that we're looking at new requests that benefit multiple or all departments or offices or critical or mandated functions that we need to maintain. Out of the 209 decision packages, 124 are being recommended today and 85 are not being recommended. And I will say, as a general whole of another filter that I use, as we went through these decision packages, that if there are policy conversations and decisions that need to be considered by the council and the council has not had an opportunity to have that, those are not being recommended today, but we can certainly look at that for supplemental or next year if that is the council's wish. And also regarding full-time equivalent staff members that were requested, I think with the exception of 1 or 2, any recommendations on FTE are done as a project position because I don't think it's a good budget practice to recommend an ongoing expense when we don't have that ongoing revenue to cover that. So the exceptions would be for FTE that have an actually dedicated funding source. So the general fund recommendations, we had a total of 134 general fund change requests submitted. 56 are being recommended and 78 are not being recommended. As I mentioned earlier, I did ask departments to submit 8% budget interventions. At this time, due to the one-time funding that we're receiving and the cost savings that departments have done, I am not recommending the budget interventions due to our revenues coming in better and the departmental savings. This also gives us some flexibility as we close out this year. If we continue down the path that we're going right now, we're going to be fine, hopefully, this year and next year. But if something else unforeseen happens that affects it, departments have already gone through the exercise of what could be reduced, and we could have those conversations quickly if needed. So the general fund recommended requests and the net impact on fund balance. The 36.8 estimated beginning fund balance that was shown on that 6-year forecast with the 10 million. With the baseline revenue budget and expense budget to over 172 million. The adopted request for general fund is 6.2 million, which leaves us a projecting ending fund balance of 27.2, which is 2.2 million above what we need to be at. Some of the specific requests, again, these are all online, very detailed reports, but also I'll just hit a couple of the big ones. So you can see the debt fund payment schedule that I mentioned earlier is 1.5 million. That's going back into the general fund. I can say even with these recommendations, I'm not intending to spend that money right now. So it actually is helping to close that structural deficit gap but it's certainly not enough to go there. There's the full-time auto licensing program coordinator. This one has the dedicated funding from the state that's going to be offsetting those costs. There's a little money in here for the Charter Review Commission. Per the charter, there needs to be a review. It's on the ballot for next week. This is $20,000 to help get a facilitator, project employee to come in and help facilitate that process and support the Charter Review Commission. The space planning for all of our spaces, including law and justice and the jail, $700,000. This was actually approved last year. Due to COVID, we halted all of that work, and this is just a carry forward so that as we have conversations into 2021, that capacity is there. And then I am recommending the 1% general fund property tax on here, and we'll talk about those a little bit a little bit later regarding how they're split out. You can see that split out in a couple different decision packages between a 0.6% and a 0.3%, and I'll go into that in a little bit. Just a couple items on the next one. As I mentioned last year, there was some money given to facilities for projects. Some of those projects actually got delayed this year because some of the supplies were coming from Canada, and due to COVID, those supplies didn't get here timely. So this carry forward is just carrying forward money not spent on those projects so they can continue. I am recommending some additional funding, $1.6 million for 2021 facilities projects. As well as the courthouse roof replacement. I'm sure the council remembers we've been hearing about this for years now. It's 29 years old. It's leaking. There's a nice little stream that starts coming in on the heavy rain. We've been patching it, but with the one-time funding, I do think it's an important project to move forward right now. And again, we are working on a long-term capital facilities plan that will address all of our unmet maintenance needs that we haven't spent. Rimini Street, this is the program that supports Oracle, and as you remember, we went from Oracle to Workday. This is the last time we're under this contract with them, so you will not see this anymore. That's $110,000. And then a cybersecurity position in IT is being recommended as a project position. So some of the items on the recommended such as fleet, some IT replacement, and there was one other one I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment, but they historically have been in the baseline budget, so the council has not seen it. We wanted to be more transparent, so any of those increases we wanted to call out separately for the council's consideration and for the community to see instead of just having that baseline increase without the transparency. So on
Kathleen,
this page, yes.
It's the auditor's indirects is the other one. Sorry to interrupt you.
Thank you. Thank you. So this, we see the 2021 fleet charges of $689,000. The sheriff's office, we are recommending a couple of project positions for them, a management analyst to analyze the jail data, and also compliance with the Washington firearms law, the initiative 1639. At the time we met with the sheriff's office, which was in September, their ability to turn around that data was out till April 2021. The sheriff's office also put in a request for the medical budget. The original request was $762,000. We did reduce that by 200 because we had 200,000 already dedicated in the baseline budget to offset that. So the amount moving forward or being recommended is 562,000. Superior Court also, I'm also recommending a couple project positions for them, a Department Information Services Coordinator to help design, customize, and oversee and troubleshoot. As you know, with COVID, they've had to move some things online and really trying to get supporting the courts so that they can meet their mandated service. The other one is a management analyst and looking at researching, analyzing, and developing recommendations on budget and financial planning. Again, and they will also work with juvenile as well as Superior Court, and they are being recommended as a project position. The next slide, so these are the positions or the requests that I'm not recommending in the general fund. Most of them are budget interventions. Actually, all of them on the slide are budget interventions. I would like to note, though, that there are some departments who are changing the way they're doing business and looked at efficiencies that might still commit to a reduction in their budget. But because we haven't had a long time to actually analyze how much that impact's going to be, we're not recognizing that savings today. So even though they're not being recommended, we are maximizing where we can. And then next year, if the savings they come to fruition, then we will be recommending them as a permanent reduction to the budget. The other reduction that I'm not recommending that's not a budget intervention are 2 packages from community development regarding the land management system. I know that they've had some leadership changes in that department, but I really want to see, and they have provided some initial information to me this week, but I would like to see a review of the project plan and really look at where we're at, what we spent, what needs to be done to close this project, and what the true ongoing needs are. There's a lot of resources that have been dedicated to this project and a lot of funding, and I just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to support that project moving forward. So again, if this is something that is presented and we come to a conclusion, this may be considered in a supplemental or next year if that's the choice that we decide to do at that time. Other general fund recommendations that I'm not making, as I mentioned, if there are policy items that the council may not have had time to fully vet or have conversations on, while I'm saying no to the recommendations now, again, if those conversations happen, the council can certainly look at these for a supplemental. One that I would like to call out that I know has been talked about a little bit is the body cameras for the sheriff's office. So that is currently not being recommended now. There's also a couple reduction in revenue realization in the sheriff's office with regards to the jail. I do think we're probably going to have to reduce that revenue, but again, I think it's too soon to actually know what that dollar amount is, and we'll review it and bring it back in a supplemental. So some of the items on this one of the non-recommended, these are tough. Some of them are like due to IT replacement or equipment replacement. As a budget person or overseeing a budget, we should have a plan on how to replace these. But at this time, because of our structural deficit, I'm not comfortable committing that out the next 6 years with these replacements. But we will certainly come up with different plans and look at the process on how we can get them on a schedule so that we're not being hit by multi-million-dollar requests in the future. And that includes like the jail housing revenues. Again, we'll look at those. I do want to call out overtime. I know the sheriff's office had recommended an increase in their overtime budget. Currently, the auditor department are doing a countywide overtime evaluation. I would like to see that data first because I think we have 2 prongs to this issue. The first thing that we need to look at is, are we operating the most efficient way that we can? Do we have the right schedules, the right people, the right support, the right service? So that's a conversations we need to have with the departments. The second part is overtime is on the controllable budgets within departments. They do not get increases on that unless they're asking. And what happens is overtime is directly related to people's salary. So salaries are increasing, but the overtime budget is not. So we may need to recognize both of those prongs to get us in line with our overtime budget moving forward. Okay, so this slide is the general fund 6-year forecast with the recommended budget included. So the square box is the 2021, the future year. You can see the green of the total baseline revenue of 272 million, and then the baseline expense of 174 million. The change requests are in the blue. There's the budget interventions previously approved by the council request, the technical adjustments carry forward, and the new request. The second 2 line items is the light blue shaded area. This is the 1% property tax increase. And I'll again go over why we're separating them out separately in just a couple of slides too. So this does include all the recommendations, including the 1%. If the recommendations for general funds were adopted by the council, it would leave projecting available fund balance at 2.15%, above the minimum fund balance. The next area is the road fund. They're starting out with an estimated beginning fund balance of $10.7 million, the revenue budget at just over $70 million, and the expense budget at negative $53.6 million. The 2020 adopted request recommendations equate to $14.8 million and leaving a $12.4 million fund balance. And I will say, Public Works, Eva, and Ahmad, I did ask them for the 6-year forecast on this, and they had it. And I don't have that in the presentation today, but I will be sending that to the council in the future, because that's one of those things we want to make sure that we have the funding to support the programs and projects that are being submitted. Make sure I'm on the right page here. Okay, so some of the items on here, again, is the fleet charges. There's a fuel site upgrades. Right now it's a manual process, so the recommendation is to add the electronic fuel usage system. There are a couple programs that they're going to be looking at, and I'm recommending and supporting them in the Bridge Master Plan Neighborhood Traffic Program to help evaluate and develop program in the budget on how we're going to maintain the neighborhoods, because the goal is to be proactive and do what's right and not less reactive to customer concerns because they're not adequate, the services aren't meeting the needs. And then as you've heard this year, the culverts, we've had a couple of sinkholes this year. So this is actually a culvert program and evaluation to get the status and condition prioritization. It will help with grants, but it will also help with finding where we need to fix things before it becomes a sinkhole and before it's an urgent matter. Neighborhood traffic program, this is evaluating and developing a program on the budget. Next slide.
And Kathleen, let me interject. I apologize. We made a mistake in the original presentation. These slides were flipped and we thought we got it corrected, but it's not in the version that we're looking at today. So this is also road fund. It really should have been the one before the last slide.
Okay, thank you. We will update. There was one slide that had additional information on it. We'll update on our web and send it to the council later today. So this one, okay, this is also recommended within the road fund. This includes the indirect costs. Again, these are costs that were normally in the baseline increase, and now we're being transparent and pulling those out. This does show the utilizing bank capacity. It has the server equipment replacement. Again, that's one that used to be in the baseline. The security contract. Our security contract is coming to an end this year. You actually will see a staff report next week regarding an RFP process and some funding attached to that. And then adjusting baseline revenues and expenses. Again, Public Works has done a great job with Eva and Ahmad looking at their budget holistically and coming up with making sure that our revenues and expenses are in line with the services that we're providing and that we're managing that budget accordingly. One of the items on here that I'm not recommending from Public Works was the reduction to Parks and Lands baseline budget. While I appreciate that they want to bring their alignment into what's actually happening and they're not necessarily balanced every year, I do think that there needs to be further conversations before we do that, and we'll find a way to help get them balanced this year. This would eliminate lifeguards and temporary staffing. But again, you know, I don't want to discourage any departments for trying to get their budgets actually balanced and reflecting what we have and what we're expending, but we want to make sure that we're having conversations of services that might be impacted. Okay, so on the building and planning and building fund, the estimated beginning balance on this was $6.5 million. You can see the revenues, expenses, and then for the recommendations, it's $0.7 million or $700,000 leaving a projected and ending fund balance of 3.9. Again, this is a theme with most of our funds here, indirect cost allocation, having those updated. There's some things that we need to do with the fire marshal's position to make sure that their coding is accurately reflected based on the work that they do. And then there was the previously approved fire marshal or reorg of the code administration. So this is truing those up this year. And the rest of these are pretty general.
Kathleen, we're still seeing the summary page on the presentation. Maybe we could scroll down. There we go.
Okay, I think we're on the next slide. Okay, so these are items that are not recommended. Again, the land management system that I talked about earlier, making sure that we actually have a functional and realistic plan on how we're going to implement and maintain that software. Okay, going on to REIT 1. The estimated beginning balance on here is $2.6 million. The recommendations that I'm recommending is the $2.5 million, and we'll put them at a projected ending fund balance of $2.2 million. This is pretty straightforward on the next slide. It's just the carry forward request for the facilities and then a small debt payment that we need to do. So the facilities carry forward that I mentioned earlier, this is the one-time moving forward $2.5 million. REIT 2 has the estimated beginning fund balance of 9.5. Recommendation for 2021 is 10.1 million. And the projecting ending fund balance is about 3.7 million. So some of these, again, are carry forward of like a railroad capital project carry forward, some support with the Vancouver Lake that the council has previously approved and seen the funding for that. Parks capital plan carry forward, and the annual construction program revenue forecast update. Mental health sales tax fund. The estimated beginning fund balance is 11.2 million. The recommendations moving forward is 0.03. It's a small move, and I can tell you for 2020, so the mental health sales tax does have a board that meets, and historically they take RFPs both internally as well as our external customers to see how we can support through the mental health sales tax. In 2020, not knowing how COVID was going to affect that revenue stream, we put it on hold for 2020. So a lot of these ones, as you can see, are ones that are supporting grants and moving forward with extending grants and stuff. So I anticipate in 2021 that board will reconvene because the fund is healthy to look at potential ways to use that dedicated funding both internally and possibly externally. 2021 property tax levies, my apologies. So the council adopts levies supporting the budget and each year considers the following property tax levies: general fund, which includes subordinate levies, veterans, mental health, and developmental disabilities, road fund, conservation futures, and the Greater Parks District. Property tax overall is generally stable and grows with construction and possible 1% annual increase. This is just another way to show where the property taxes go. So this is a pie chart, and I will have, I believe, on the next couple slides, some examples of property tax statements, because as our community receives property tax statements, I do think that some of them think all of those tax money comes to the county because it's sent by the county and processed through the county. With this pie chart, you can, yes, go ahead.
I was going to let you know this isn't the updated version, so maybe we can pull up those property tax statements separately.
Okay. So as you can see from this slide, about 16% of the overall property taxes actually comes to the county, and this is showing a county and county roads. And it looks Emily, are you able to share those examples from your end?
I can
Oh,
try. Give me
never
just a
mind.
second. Rebecca's
It
got
looks
it.
like they're. And we have the experts here as well, Alicia Topper, our treasurer, and Sarah, who actually support and manage these funds coming in and out. So, okay, so this is an example of a property tax statement for somebody who resides within the city of Vancouver limits. In the top left shaded blue, you can see the tax and assessment distribution. So there you can see that there's battleground schools, state schools. These are different levies that school districts or the McCleary decision requires. There's fire districts, conservation futures, the library, clean water, mosquito control. So there is, and then on the next page of this, the second page, it provides the customer a history and a comparison over the last few years. If you scroll down just a little bit more. Okay, so the previous one I think was more for the unincorporated. This one is within the city of Vancouver. My apologies. I should have known that with the battleground. So this, as you can see, also includes the city of Vancouver. So they have additional taxes going to the city of Vancouver, Vancouver school districts, capital facilities for the library, the state school amount, and you can see the Clark County amount there, 413. Then there's a port. The Port of Vancouver has a tax, so the taxes do look a little different based on the jurisdiction where you live, whether it's a specific city or in the unincorporated areas. But again, out of that, on an average, it's 20%, I think, at most, and Alicia, please correct me if I'm wrong, that actually comes to the county for the revenues. So before I move on, I want to make sure, Alicia or Sarah, if you have any comments, any further comments you want to make on this. If not, we can go back.
No, I think you made the point. It's the taxing districts, especially schools, make up the largest portion of the taxes collected on the tax statement. And the county's portion is relatively small in comparison. Even if you look at the cities and the local voter approved levies as well, which is another point on the front upper portion under the tax distribution. It tells taxpayers what portion of their tax bill was voter approved versus a councilmatic budget decision by their elected representatives. So in this tax statements example, you'll see underneath the itemized district listing that 35.96% of this bill was approved by the voters. So the individuals paying the bills, either themselves or their neighbors, decided that that was worthy of paying.
Thank you. Okay, we go back to the presentation. So how are property taxes calculated? So the property taxes are one of the primary funding sources that we do have to help pay for our services that we're providing. I mean, we're not in the business of making widgets or things that we can sell. It's really about the service that we're providing to the community. And I think maximizing on the revenue, we need to really consider that to ensure that our service levels are being met. The county assessor and the treasurer administer the property tax. The county assessors value asset your property, and county treasurers collect the property tax and distribute them to the districts. Washington State has a budget-based system for the property taxation. There are three main components of levy amount, assessed value, and levy rate. So the calculation you can see there at the bottom of the slide on how the property tax are calculated is they take the levy amount, they add the assessed value, and that equals the levy rate per 1,000 assessed value. So I mentioned earlier about the 1% and why we're splitting it out between 0.602 and 0.398. Due to some RCW language or WAC language, some language in the state law, it does state that inflation for 2021, our inflation of property taxes dropped below the 1%. The inflation is actually the 0.602%. So with that said, we have, that's the county, the majority of the council, so 3 members, could approve the 0.602 increase. In order to maximize and go to the full 1%, the county and the council would have to have a resolution declaring that we have a substantial need to do so to increase that levy amount to the full 1%. So that's an additional 3.398. In order for that to be approved, that takes the supermajority of the council or 4 councilors to approve that 1%. Again, looking at our 6-year forecast, looking at our services and seeing how expenses are outpacing our revenue, it is my recommendation that we're taking the full 1% so that even with the full 1%, we're not fully funded moving forward, and we're going to continue to have some very hard conversations regarding policy and operations and level of service, and we certainly want to maintain not just mandated services in our community, but an exceptional mandated service. So this is how the property taxes would look for our customers. If you look at the lower half of the screen in the green, so in the white first, you can see what the levy is, and then the 2020 choice that the council made at that time. The first green column is showing a 0%. The second column is that cap of the 2.602%. There's the bank capacity, and then if we moved forward with that additional 0.398 substantial need, that's in the purplish color. The far right side has the combined 0.602 and the 0.398 to get us to the 1%. That amount is an annual increased amount. It's based on the 2020 median household price of $389,900 per the RMLS date posted in June of 2020. So if the median home price, if you live in a home that's just above $389,000, the total increase that you will see for all of those recommended levy tax increases is $9.46 per year. Of course, this will go up and down based on the cost of your home and also based on the number of new homes in construction. Just a little history on the property taxes. This shows that with our road fund, historically, the county council did not take the 1% 8 times since 2010. The cumulative impact is about $24 million less levied for road fund activities. And the impact compounds and was last calculated at $3.5 million less levied annually for the road fund. Road diversion has been in place at $4.5 million since 2009. There's about $54 million that's been diverted from the road fund, and it currently pays for some of the sheriff patrols in the unincorporated Clark County. So one question I had and was reminded earlier, you don't see the general fund, because our general fund tax the council also opted not to take the 1% historically. But last year, there was a recommendation that was approved to use the bank capacity, so there is none available now. So in addition to potential property tax increases presented in the previous slide, new construction is also forecasted to bring in tax revenue in the amounts above or in front of you, a portion of which are already included in the baseline forecast. And that amount is about 1% or $1 million that were already included in baseline. So this is the general fund subordinate levies. Out of the general fund 1%, the council does have an option to specify these amounts for the mental health and disability or developmental disabilities or the veterans. There is no recommendation on this. This is simply the council's purview. If you want to reallocate some of if the 1% gets approved with general fund, if you want to then allocate some of that funds to one of these 2 subordinate levies, the council has the option to do so. And these are just showing what the 2020 choice was for those subordinate levies, the 2020 amount, the minimum rate for 2021, and then it calls out similarly the 0.602 and the 0.398%. So that is the end of the formal presentation. And I just want to summarize before I talk about next steps, and also open up the floor for council to ask questions. I am truly impressed by the departments who have stepped up in 2020 and in 2021. A lot of these requests, even the unfunded or recommended unfunded, is a need, but unfortunately, due to our structural deficit and other challenges, we can't recommend everything because we would not be able to present to you a balanced budget, which is required by law, but it's also fiscally prudent to do so. And again, all the departments and elected officials really were mindful. They were not greedy. They really were strategic on the approach that they took. And the conversations with them, I mean, I think this is a labor of love. Departments may not agree because it was a lot of work, but I truly appreciated this process and learning the details of what all the departments do and the services that we provide. And then getting the insight and the background knowledge from department heads, electeds, their finance managers, the finance team, and the budget office. They have been working full-time on this, and I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's contributed to getting us through 2020 and also giving me the ability to present to you a recommended 2020 budget. With that, I'm open for questions, and if I don't have the answer, we've got the experts here on the call.
Do we have questions from the council? So I have one, and this may need to be followed up. Looking at the increase in expense on the medical contract for the jail, I believe we just approved that contract last year, maybe it was the year before, so we're not that far into it. So I'd be curious to know why the $500,000 increase is there for that item.
I can just say historically that the budget has not been increased, and it wasn't increased at the time for that new contract. We did some moving of budget this year to accommodate the 2020 expenses, and the sheriff's office is now just asking for an ongoing recognition of that increase in contract. What the county managers approved is a one-time correction for 2021, but that will need to be an ongoing discussion as we approach future years.
Thank you.
Councilor Blum, a quick question.
Yeah, Councilor Slim.
So just looking at the mental health sales tax, this is with the 8.7 million projected fund balance. If that organization or that board awards funds for 2021 as those requests come in, that will be reflected in a supplemental in 2021?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And I do have a number of questions, but I wanted to follow up with Council Olson's because the mental health fund is among the very healthy ones. So what policy decisions are we able to make with that fund? I don't understand the process or procedure with the board. I mean, I'm looking, and I brought it up a couple of times on this arrest deferral process that's going to be tied to True Blood money. But between detox, mental health, addiction, which is an overlapping issue, we've got this opportunity to impact a number of policy areas of concern. One, getting police out of a response on mental health issues. Two, increasing our crisis stabilization capacity. So the police, if they get a call, would have one phone number to call if the discretion is exercised to divert someone from the criminal process into mental health care. And so there's a lot of initiatives coming up that will need some funding and additional bed space and capacity for coordinating that bed space among some of our nonprofits. So this fund would be a perfect fund to accelerate into to address all these overlapping needs. So what is the process for getting some of our policy issues satisfied by accelerating kind of the expenditure off of this very robust fund?
So the fund, there, like I said, there is a board that have key strategic staff that have direct impact on the services that you're discussing. And historically, I think this is the second or third year that there was, like I said, the RFP process that was put out, like an informal one within the county itself, within county government, as well as community stakeholders who may want to use it. These funds are restricted and have to be used in a certain way. But that RFP process then goes to the board, like I said, that has key internal stakeholders on there who directly impact these services, and they rank them just like you would with an RFP and prioritize. I don't know historically, and I know Emily and Lindsay have been part of this process, but when that, it's been a successful process and a successful way to really take in the input and the feedback from all the stakeholders and develop those priorities and make the recommendation moving forward with allocating money from the mental health sales tax. It's my intention that as we move forward with that this will come back to the council even before it's officially approved. I'm not sure if that happened in the past, because we do want to be transparent and support those processes.
Councilor Baum, if I could just add to that, just because I was around and part of the beginning of this process, we've been collecting mental health sales tax for a long, long time, and that fund was increasing faster than we were actually spending it. So the council approved this framework to try to find ways to get this into the community where it was designed to go originally. And so this was probably at least 2 years ago that we agreed and adopted this framework for allocation of mental health sales tax dollars. And to Kathleen's point, I think it's been working pretty well up to this point, so that we do have a process to make sure those funds are being allocated appropriately and as they were designed to be collected.
So hopefully we can take a relook at that process perhaps and make sure we're spending these taxes that we're collecting, because we do have a need in the mental health domain, and I think we have the capacity to spend more. So anyway, that was my comment on that. Hopefully we can do more work in that area. The slide that went to tax leakage, and I think it's maybe slide 10. It's the first time I've seen a spread of 10% to 30% estimates. And I know that the comparison chart, it may not be really comparing apples to oranges as far as where we're at, mainly because of the cost of living, average salaries, what may equate to disposable income. So, because I kept hearing from different sources, 25% was a more accurate tax leakage number, and that equates to about 25 million. So I'm wondering, I understand this is a forecast, an estimate, but what's the best estimate? What are we really potentially losing here? I heard at the low end, pretty much 12.7, or maybe at the average end, 12.7 that we're actually losing. But, looking at a preponderance of the evidence, or clear and convincing evidence, what is that? Are we at closer to 30%, 25%? Why the range?
I might be able to interject that Mark Gassaway was helping with this presentation, and I believe he's on a plane to Boston right now, so he's not able to join us. But he did want me to just reiterate that this is, it's not an exact science. So depending on what we compare ourselves to, are we comparing ourselves to the state average? If it's the state average, it's probably the higher end. If we're comparing ourselves to the top 10 counties, King County's in there, and King County is a way different mix than what we have. It's really not an apple to apple comparison. So I do think in the past, you've been given like the 25% mark. I don't know if that's the best one, but maybe going in between, it's not an exact science is basically what he told me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, maybe we just can't get any closer to an amount, but certainly the variance from 10 to 30% makes the number more dramatic or not, depending on how it's viewed. And then when we look at the 6-year forecast, from taking the 1% property tax every year, what I saw was between those two slides, the one without was a 35 million versus 40 million. And that's still in the hole. So I want to make sure I understood that forecast, and so the counselors would see that as well, that taking the 1% property taxes is not going to solve our problem every year. That's not really at the heart of this structural deficit. So I didn't write down the slide numbers on those two different 6-year forecasts, but the numbers didn't vary that far if you look out 6 years between taking the 1% and not taking it. Did I understand that slide correctly?
Let's get to the slide first. I think it's the slide 14 is the one that shows it without any recommendations, and I believe you're referencing the slide that actually shows the recommendations and the 1%.
Correct.
Which includes the 1%. Okay, let me find it. 27.
Hi, Counselor. This is Sarah Lowe in the Treasurer's Office. I did just want to add one thing to what Emily was saying, and that is that the online sales tax is something that's new to our county that will be helping to sort of close that gap in leakage. And I especially think in a year like this, where our citizenry probably did do a lot of online shopping. I think that, things the gap may be smaller in a year like this year. And then going forward, as consumer habits change, that's also something we would want to take into consideration as we try to pinpoint just how large that sales tax leakage is. So just wanted to add on that. I think 2020 is really part of the first full year that we're going to realize that online sales tax component. So thank you.
And that's a good point. And I know that helped reduce the amount of loss in our sales tax revenue this year, but this hopefully will be an unusual year and not repeated. But I appreciate that comment.
So with regards to this and the 1%, so the lighter blue is the 1%. And yes, you're accurate. We're not projecting to have a balanced budget, but this only shows a 1% for 1 year. So this does not assume that in 2020 another 1% will be taken. So if it is taken, then it actually compounds, and if it's not taken, that also compounds and adds to the deficit. But we do have the ongoing where expenses are exceeding our revenues. But this is, one revenue source that's really important to help close that gap.
Okay, so I had to ask for a slide that showed taking it every year, so I guess we didn't get that. I would be interested in seeing a slide that shows, because the gap isn't significantly reduced, just taking that one single year 1%. The other area I wanted to ask about was the assessed value. We had seen, I guess by separate email, about a $10 billion increase in assessed value, about 6.5% increase. So what I was hoping to see was the impact on the taxpayer on their increased assessed value across the county. Because, all these impacts of raising taxes are cumulative, including the assessed value on the individual taxpayer. So is there a dollar figure that can be given now, if you know it, on that 6.5 increase in assessed value, or are taxpayers paying additionally?
So Alicia or Peter, you can certainly jump in, but the amounts that I shared with the 1% for that average homeowner, that's what it's assessed on. So that $9.45, that for the average homeowner. Go ahead, Alicia, I just saw you unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and dive in and then ask if Nick Dethridge in the assessor's office has anything to add. But Counselor, as you know, the Washington State tax system is budget-based. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if your assessed value increases, that your taxes are going to be correlated to that increase. So as the assessed values go up on our homes, our tax rate per $1,000 goes down. So you'll notice if you look at those tax comparisons on the back of your statement, you'll see that in some instances, the rate that someone is paying is less than what they paid the previous year. And that is likely due to the fact that their assessed value went up. So it's not necessarily going to see a apples to apples comparison. Now, the one line item on your tax statement where that isn't true is the state schools tax. Because when the legislature passed that increase, they set it at a rate. And so it is an apples to apples increase. And the majority of increases that taxpayers see on their bill is associated with the state schools levy. But Nick, do you want to add anything?
Good morning, councilors. I agree with what Alicia said. Usually you see a levy rate decline over time as assessed values increase. So it's as the tax base gets bigger, you can actually see a reduction in the total amount of taxes paid by the median household just because the overall tax base is increasing throughout the county. So it's difficult to show the effects of increased assessed value on one household because it's budget based, as Alicia said. It's not a locked rate. The rate will decline because of the 1% limitation on increasing taxes. And if you have assessed values increasing at a rate higher than 1%, then you're going to see a reduction in the levy rate.
So, Alicia, so are you basically saying for our average taxpayer out there, if their assessed value goes up, they're not paying more in property tax?
So it depends. I mean, as Nick mentioned, it's how much of the total assessed value in the county divided by the budget. And that is true for every single taxing district. And the county is just one of those taxing districts. So there are statements and multiple statements where people actually paid less in a county tax in 2020 than they did in 2019. So it just depends. And that's why that new construction and getting that on the books and being able to add that to the tax roll really helps everybody because it increases the assessed value, which drives the rates down. But I'd be happy to offer the treasurer's office or in partnership with the assessor's office to come and do a workshop. I've done several presentations in the community on this topic as well, because it is really confusing. Individuals automatically assume that when their assessed values increase, and if it's significant, that they're going to see a proportionate increase in their tax bill. And it is just not the case in most instances.
Yeah, so I think it is important because we get emails all the time from people who are appealing their assessments and what they view as their taxes going up as a result of assessments going up. And it isn't quite a parallel or an inverse process as well. So, I mean, I think we need to be more clear on where that sits. But you mentioned, what you last mentioned is the last point I wanted to make. You know, we need to get our properties, our construction on the tax rolls. And I remember the assessor mentioning that there's quite a bit basically deferred every year because of the process and the lack of processors to bring all that new property onto our tax rolls. And then the other parallel issue is our permitting process is taking so long that it really is delaying the construction that's in the pipeline. So we're missing out on our tax base there as well. And that should be a priority, I think, for the county manager and getting these, one, the assessments onto our rolls, and two, getting these permits streamlined so it doesn't take a year or two for development to get approved.
Other questions from the council? Okay, Kathleen, do you want to talk about next steps? So you did a little bit, but is there anything further that you want to add before we wrap this work session up?
No, just a reminder, on Monday, that November 16th is when the council will hear feedback from the elected officials, and then the hearing is on the 17th. I would ask if the council has any additional questions or things that you want to us to explore, we want to make sure that you have what you need for your hearing. So we'll be in conversations, and we're here to support.
I would like to see the impact of that compounding the 1%, because I know I don't agree with Councilor Medavji's assessment. We heard numbers that in a previous work session talking about the impact of the 1% not being taken for 4 years. And I know that was, I want to say it was like $5 to $10 million a year on the compounding effect of that. And I could be misremembering the number a little high, but it was significant. So I think seeing that both historically and going forward would be helpful as we're making these decisions.
Absolutely. We can have that to you by tomorrow.
Okay. And also, I would like to sharpen our pencil a bit on our expense side, you know, especially those packages that are talking about self-insurance or contingency budgets, that 700,000 that we set aside for a space study. I'm wondering if we can take a closer look at actual amounts, because those, you know, if we run into a problem with self-insurance or paying out claims, I mean, the budget can always be, as an emergency, adjusted. I know we don't want to get in that process routinely, but there are a number of packages that are basically notional or forecast amounts that I think we should look at. I mean, I'm trying to be transparent about this. I'm certainly looking for ways during this pandemic and these austere years for our citizens of not raising any taxes whatsoever. Let's take a knee. We're doing great work. And I would echo what Kathleen has said about all the elected and all of her departments that have really tightened their belts this past year to lessen the impact for the county. But I think we can do more. So I'd ask that we look in that regard for additional savings in this coming year, so we do not have to raise any taxes whatsoever.
Any other comments from councilors? Councilor Olson?
Yeah, just one. I think on slide 13, I think we had sort of the estimated increase in salaries and benefits. Can we get a trend line on that, maybe over the last 6 years, just year over year, what those actuals were?
Yes, we have that.
Okay, and then Councilor Medavji, I would only say that if you, I think that the staff has done great work here, and this has, again, been a difficult year, so I appreciate all of that. But this is the county manager's recommendation. If you have some ideas that you want to come bring to the council that would qualify for sharpening the pencil, then I would hope and recommend that you do that. I think they've done a lot of work up to this point, and this is what they've presented. So if you've got some ideas for us to consider, please bring them forward. So thanks everyone for all your hard work.
Okay, if there's no other comments, we will wrap this up. Thank you, everyone, Kathleen, Emily, the rest of the team. I know a lot of people put a lot of effort into this, so I would second Councilor Olson's appreciation for all the work. So thank you, and we are adjourned.
So we'll take a 5-minute break and then reconvene the council time.